I want to continue my talks on the series of covert emotional incest. Now, I've had many experiences with this, and it sounds like a horrible thing in its description. But I can tell you that it's very complicated, fierce, and relentless. If you're in a relationship with somebody who has developed covert emotional incest with their children, I warn you today, through this talk, that you will have a battle against you that will be stealth. You will not know that's what's going on behind the scenes, and you will be judged without mercy. Covert incest is something that is formed over many years. It comes out of broken children that are in relationships that are broken, and usually what happens is the mother will replace the father or the person that they're in the relationship with. It might be a step-parent that the children only know as a parent other than the mother. The child becomes the surrogate partner after the relationship dissolves. The reason for this is it's easier for the mother to use their children as a form of emotional supply rather than a man emotional supply, because in most cases men let women down for all the wrong reasons, and this then causes the woman to want to protect herself from any further damage that men might do. And I don't think you can blame women for this, or men either, because in some cases it's men that allow the formation of covert emotional incest with their children. What happens is it's a matter of convenience, really. The relationship between the parent and the child crosses boundaries that it shouldn't. Children aren't welcome into certain areas of adult life. But if that's become part of the pattern between the child and the parent, it's a very dangerous place to find yourself in. The reason for that is there'll be things happening behind the scenes that you'll have no control over, because you must remember blood is always thicker than water. That can't be changed. And why would you want to change that? I mean, the love the parent has for its children should never be interfered with. But don't underestimate, if you're in a relationship and you're not the father or the mother of those children, and you're in a relationship with the father or the mother of those children, and you don't suit, then you're going to find yourself in a battle where there's skirmishes going on that you don't even know about. And the problem with it is will come to a point for the parent where the child will put them in a position almost where they have to make a choice. And if the parent doesn't go with the child, then things are going to get ugly. I can remember I was in a relationship with a woman, and I've had many experiences with this, and I decided that it was time to make a commitment, and I did. I began staying with her at her house. one night at about 1 o'clock in the morning, and her son lived in the house. He was about 16 or 17, about 6'2". Should have been well on his way to developing a life for himself. But the mother and the father had just split up, and for whatever reason. And there's 1,000 reasons why women leave men today. It's amazing. And there's 1,000 reasons why men leave women today, and not for the most part are any legitimate, but this is the new order of things in relationships. You can make up anything these days to find your way out of a relationship. It's ridiculous, really. But we're sleeping away, and the next thing I hear the door crack, and I think to myself, well, the son must be needing to ask his mother something. And mother's there, and I'm there laying beside her, and getting through the night and to go to work the next morning. Anyway, I'm lying there, I'm aware that there's somebody in the room. Sorry for laughing, but it's just so laughable. I mean, if you can comprehend this, you're a much deeper and wiser person than I was. And I hear this pitter-patter across to the side of the bed, and I'm waiting for this person to ask his mother about something or other. But no, that wasn't the case, and this is a true story. I'm not sure what was going on before I come on the scene, but this fellow jumped into bed with us. Now that might sound fanciful or not possible or not true. We're talking about a 16-year-old young man, 6'2", and he's just gotten into bed with his mother and her new partner. Well, I was waiting for something to happen. Nothing happened. They just sort of, you know how you get into bed and you snuggle into a comfortable position, and that's that. Well, I wrestled with myself for about 5 minutes or so and decided that this isn't something I was able to cope with at that stage. So I headed for the door as calmly as I could and made my way home. And something inside me said, do not go back to that place. Now, when you hear that still little voice, I would advise at least to give it some thought and try not to ignore it, because I did. And I will go on with this story and you will see why. So the next day I get a phone call with the woman says to me, well, what happened to you last night? And to be honest with you, I tell you, you've got to be straight. You've got to have your mind available to you in situations like this. I said, well, I thought last night we got a little bit dysfunctional for what I'm used to. Being the way I was raised, which was to get out and have a go and get on with your life. I was out of home at 16. Excuse me. I bought my first house, worked hard for it by the time I was 18, so I was out of home very early, and I didn't want to be at home anyway. We were taught that parent relationships are not to be, you're not to be involved in those, and go find one for yourself. Well, that's what I did. Anyway, we're on the phone trying to work out what happened last night. Well, I said, I'm sorry, but I find what happened last night is very dysfunctional. I got the reply of, oh, no, it's cultural. I said, well, I argue that. We agreed to have a talk about it. So we meet for a talk and we decide that it was a one-off event due to the tension upon this child, the mental health problems that were coming upon this child as a result of the breakup between his mother and father. And I want to say that these people were very, very nice people. I wasn't in their marriage, so that's not my problem, but individually these people were very nice people. And to be quite honest with you, it's a shame when you see what can happen to good people when things can't be worked out in their marriages. You come along and the next thing you're getting what I would call theatre of how things can break down towards within marriages and towards people. Now, what had happened is for the person to get to this stage is this. This is not what we're not culturalized to do. Obviously, many, many years before the separation, the intimacy and the respect and the things that are the usual dynamics that happen in a healthy marriage or relationship had broken down. Resentments and bitternesses towards the husband had developed, and the replacement of the husband by the mother was now the son. The son was the form of the mother's emotional needs, whilst the father's emotional needs were being rejected. She didn't want his involvement anymore. She had enough of him, but remained with the man for, as far as I understand, for a decade or so after the relationship really had been damaged to the point where it wasn't worth keeping. Now, you've got to understand what happens to children in these environments. The mother now has chosen the son as the surrogate source of male attention. And what this does is very destructive to the children. Just while I think of it, in every case that I've experienced with this, there's always been a problem with the male adult child that's on the end of this covert emotional incest. They've always, without fail, had difficulty with getting girlfriends. Now, the reason for this is, and to be quite honest with you, I never saw one with a girlfriend, not one. They were always too meshed up with their mother to be able to navigate anything positive with a female outside of the house, because you've got different characteristics and natures and things working in people's lives and minds depending on the way that they're raised. Now, these aren't criticisms, these are observations, and I advise you to pay very careful attention to what I'm talking about. You can't do anything about what's happened in a family dynamic before you've come along. And to be quite frank, it's not your job to try and change anything in these people's lives. You've got to put yourself in a position where your life's developing and your needs are being met, because once you find yourself getting entangled into one of these covert emotional incest situations, you are, no matter how hard you try, going to end up on the outside. And I'm going to tell you how and why. So we decided that this was a one-off instance and that it won't happen again. And I could see that it was more than that. It was like a territorial statement from the son that I need my mother and I need her more than you. Now, I've never heard of a 16 or 17-year-old child, young adult, as a matter of fact, 6'4", ever going and getting into bed with his mother while she's with her new partner. How would the mother expect anybody to understand how that works? Now, it's not a criticism of the woman. What you find now is a person who's trying to keep a broken child, who's trying to manage psychologically the incomprehensible disappointment of the mother and the father breaking up, and then add to that the mother being with another man, and you've got a person that's asking and trying to resolve with themselves many, many questions that are just too hard to digest or understand without a period of time to be able to do that. As a matter of fact, some children and most children never get over the fact that their parents have separated. So, I mean, I'm just scratching the surface here. There's so many more dynamics that you would never comprehend. So I decided to go back, and this woman, she wanted to love, well, at least share. She at least wanted to be with me, and I believe she did fall in love with me, and I with her. But now I began watching this woman try to balance her emotional supply that she needed as a woman, that she hadn't experienced masculinity for, that she enjoyed for over a decade. Now, again, here we go. The son, who was the surrogate supply for the mother for many, many years now, is trying to understand how all of a sudden the mother is turned to somebody else for their masculine supply. And when you think about it, a young boy that hasn't really experienced much in life is not going to be much competition for a masculine male that knows his way around a relationship and knows how to at least enable a woman to have a good supply of masculinity and everything that goes with it in terms of communication, emotional care, and all the rest of it. The young boy is not going to be a challenge to that. And what you'll find is the mother, particularly at the start, will push the child to the side to a point, because she's going to want her needs met. Now that's okay, but that doesn't make sense to the child, because now you've got a child that's got another problem on its hands besides the mother and the father breakup and all the consequences and things that they've had to work through with that, where his supply of the mother in the adult realm is now switched and stopped and turned off like a tap. Now, you can imagine there's going to be a protest, and it's not going to be pretty. I have seen the most fierce opposition to mothers against the new partner, to extremes where the only way I can describe it is as fierce. The exchanges, the incredible ways in which they'll try and undermine the invader, because that's what the new male is, can be identified to them as, an invader. And it's a terrible invasion. It's like a foreigner coming into the house and taking over the treasure chest, as it were. Because now the young adult male, who's the surrogate partner, has just been knocked off his pedestal or perch or whatever you want to call it, and standing there going, how can you do this to me? Now, the parents set themselves up for this because they've allowed over the years the formation of this relationship to cross over the boundaries of a normal parent-child relationship to a surrogate partner involvement. And you can colour this up, you can pretty this up, you can doll this up, you can even reject this, but the fact is, these things have a formation, and it's the parents that allow the formation to happen. How can a 16 to 17-year-old 6'4" child think he can waltz into a bedroom with the mother and her new partner without any warning and just jump into bed with this person. And I hardly knew the boy. Well, they can, because it's a territorial, trained behaviour where the mothers have pushed the husband or whoever it was aside and chosen that their emotional security will be found in the young adult child or male or whatever you want to call it. Now, I've seen people be abused for different things illegitimately, but I've never seen the abuse and the turmoil and the trouble that an adult parent and a young adult child that are in a covert emotional incestual relationship, I've never seen anything like the turmoil between these two when somebody else comes in to the relationship. It is fierce, it's diabolical, it's relentless, it won't give up, it won't surrender, it won't stop. Because how can it? You're working now with a child that's been trained to have a position in the parent's life that it was never supposed to have. How can it understand what's going on? It's human nature to defend something that you think's yours, even if it's a delusion in its making. This is trained behaviour. What else are these young males supposed to do? I mean, it's human nature to protect what you think's yours. It can be under the guise of, oh, I'm protecting this woman from this man because it's my mother. But no, it's a lot more than that. I'm protecting my source of femininity supply, and it's coming from my mother who has allowed this to happen. You've got to understand that this becomes a lust. This becomes an attraction. This becomes a need for the young adult child. They have to have their supply too, and they don't want to share it with anybody else. Why would they? They got mummy all to themselves. They've had mummy all to themselves. And I have to say, it's the most dramatic, dysfunctional theatre I've ever had privy to watch. I watched this woman, this gentle woman, cop abuse for 3 years straight that you would not expect a criminal in jail to cop. This poor woman. Anyway, to cut a long story short, about 2 weeks later, we're in bed again. The relationship's going along fine. Bit of work to do. Trying to work in with the very upset son, etc. I didn't know what was going on behind the scenes, but I can assure you it wasn't pretty. And the door cracks open at about 2 o'clock in the morning. And I'm thinking, well, he must be going to ask his mother something, and that will be that. So I'm lying there trying to figure out what's going on, and sure enough, he hops into bed again with us. And I've gone, no, this can't be true. She'll kick him out this time, because the first time has been discussed, and I'm sure we've come to a resolution. She said it wouldn't happen again, but now it's happened again. And I'm waiting for this woman to ask a 17-year-old 6'4" son who's come into the bedroom at 1 o'clock in the morning to go back to his bed. Well, I had a plan this time, because I didn't think it was fair for me to say anything to the woman. I mean, she had to try keep the peace, but this was completely out of order. And I'm sure you'd agree. So nothing happens, and I'm lying there and I'm going, can this be true? Like, and then I started to realise how powerful, how extraordinarily powerful, the power that a child can have over a parent who's allowed the formation of covert emotional incest to take place. Now, this child would have been told that this is out of order, but his instinct and the pattern of behaviour that obviously has been formed was too much for him, and he's just stuck with what he was used to. You got to remember, I hardly knew this kid. Did you, when you were 17-year-old, go and get into bed with your mother, who's with a bloke that you hardly even know? I don't think so. Now, you've got to understand, I'm not being critical of these people. I was trying to, as best I could, psychologically work out what was going on and try and play a part in which this could be less abrasive, whatever the conflicts were that were going on. And don't worry, I started to have conflicts within myself that I needed to deal with, because I was seeing this as a very unhealthy situation to find myself in. But this time I didn't leave. I decided that if he wants to come into the adult territory and the mother doesn't want to do anything about it, because, see, this is the danger. Blood's thicker than water. A mother will not confront her child in a way in which it's going to jeopardize her position with that child. She'll try and fix the problem, but she'll only go so far. You'll see if you're in this situation, the child will get its way in the end. You can kid yourself all you like. It doesn't matter how good or bad a person you are. The child will get its way in the end. It's guaranteed, because blood's thicker than water, and why shouldn't it be? And this is why you've got to be very careful of your emotional, psychological welfare if you're involved in this kind of dysfunctional situation. And believe me, you couldn't buy tickets to a theatre that could present what you will see in these kind of environments. Now, it doesn't mean that the parent-child aren't trying to, they're not trying to be destructive. This is learnt behaviour. This behaviour has been allowed to form. So there's an element of consciousness where this is supposed to be normal, but if you're an outsider looking in, you're going, this is far from normal. This is, as a matter of fact, this is very concerning. By this time I was concerned. So what I decided to do, without having to say anything, was phantom, which means rehearse, a situation where I was going to have sex. So I threw the leg over the mother. I had no intention of having sex with her, but I wanted to make a statement myself. Mate, you're in a situation here that you put yourself in a very private place and you shouldn't be in here. Well, can you imagine it? I've thrown the leg over, and all of a sudden there's people going in all directions. You can imagine the shock. I don't know whether they thought I was just supposed to lay there and cop it or what was going on. I left the first time. I thought I'll do the opposite this time. I'll go intimate. But I had no intention of actually carrying it out. I just wanted to see what was going to happen. Well, it was like there was a rat in the bed. Well, the son went back to his room. The mother went after him to try and console what was going on. But there was never going to be a console. There's yelling, screaming, carrying on, and all the stuff that goes with it. And the problem with the situation was I hadn't definitely done anything wrong. Again, I was just watching the theatre of it all. And now the sad part of it was you've got a mother that's torn between a child that's become a surrogate partner and her new partner, who she really wants to develop a relationship with, but's torn between the two. Well, the son was left in his bedroom and the woman come back to be with me. Well, what was the consequence of this? The consequence of this was the son was gone to live with the father before nightfall the next night. And the retaliation from the ex-husband or whatever, the ex-husband, quite a nice man actually, towards the mother, now combined with the son, because the ex-husband had his griefs with the mother because she'd left him. You can imagine there was a lot going on there, and now he's got some allies, particularly the main one, the son, who was the golden child, and put on a pedestal. Now she's got two going at her. And I mean, I've seen abuse, but I've never seen anything like this. This was a whole new level to me. I didn't find it very acceptable in any way whatsoever. So the punishment was to take the son away from the mother, and the son was going away to be trained in how to punish somebody that doesn't conform. And I watched this for 3 years and it was horrible. I saw this woman being bailed up, lectured, screamed at, yelled at. They'll undermine the new partner without any conscience in front of you. I mean, I have never seen anything so fierce as this. This went on for years. It got so bad that I had to choose to separate from this person. I couldn't stand the abuse that I was witnessing, the psychological abuse that she was putting herself through, and I have to say that she just wanted to be loved. But again, the formation that she'd allowed between herself and the son in setting him up as a surrogate partner, the consequences of this were so horribly bad. I can't describe the word for it. Just fiercely abusive, destructively abusive. That, I don't know, I think this woman had a few breakdowns as well. Anyway, we separated. I had to say, look, I can't watch this anymore. I'm trying to have a peaceful life, and I'm watching this destruction. It was actually a consequence of her leaving the first husband, really, or the breakdown in the marriage with the first husband. So we separated, that's fine. But what she realised was this boy now, she'd given him a new form of authority, and that was an authority that allowed him to be able to realise that he can, to some extent, destroy the connection that she has between the new partner and herself, which puts him back in control of the mother, which is all that he was trying to achieve. Remove the invader, because that's how they see you, as an invader. It doesn't matter how kind or loving or supportive you're being to the mother, that's irrelevant. You're an invader when it comes to parent-child relationships. You've got to be aware of this, and you've got to keep a close eye on how much damage is being done to your effort to try and give this person a loving life. Because you've got to realise the influence of blood is thicker than water. It doesn't matter unless you find an exceptional human being that knows boundaries and has an appreciation for the opportunity to love. You are never ever going to break this bond. And it's not your job to do that. Well, to cut a long story short, we got back together one way or another, and we ended up getting married. Now, I get the request, can my son walk me down the aisle? I knew straight away that behind the scenes, this covert emotional incest was still spiritually intact. And I thought about it, and I thought, that's so far out of order. What that is saying is the son has almost the authority of the father over the mother. Now, whilst the son, I suppose, was the only person left in this person's life that was a male that could walk her down the aisle, I thought that she should just walk down the aisle herself, because a lot of people don't understand the way in which the spiritual realm works, and that was giving the son a new form of authority over the mother. And that's not the son's fault, but it's something that you don't want to allow to be established. So anyway, the son walks the mother down the aisle, and saying to myself, oh gosh, where's this going to end up? And knowing what I knew about the psychology behind this and how it works, I thought to myself, this thing's still at play, and this thing's still very powerful. But he didn't live with us, and I noticed as I was watching that he still was unable to establish himself in a relationship with a woman at all. I mean, the damage that this had done to this young man was really, it was just, I can't even find a word for it. It was just so damaging. I mean, it affected this young man who had all the potential in the world, handsome, tall, very strong stature, but unable to supply himself with a girlfriend that would be able to meet his needs outside the needs he had for his mother. Does that make sense? I hope it does, because this is what happens. The parents actually sabotaging the male's ability to function properly with women outside the connection of his mother. It's as a male, you look at it and you go, how could things have come to this? Because the male in their psyche is so preoccupied with the mother, for some strange reason it sabotages their capabilities to function with a woman other than the mother, because they're so connected, and the entanglement and entwinement is so emotionally deeply rooted that there's no place for a stranger in the form of another girl really to get any foothold in this person's life if they find a way of meeting one, either or either. As a male that knew the value of relationship and the exchanges between femininity and masculinity, I was angry, really, to say the least, that things can happen to young men like this as a result of their parents' needs. So, let's jump forward. So, the mother and I got married, and we had a wonderful marriage for 5 years. We were inseparable. We had some moments here and there, but it was usually as a result of the conflict going on between her and her son. So one thing led to another, and the son needed to move in with us. The father had remarried, and I think the son had worn out his welcome down there, because he was following in his father's footsteps, where do as little as you can for as long as you can until people can't tolerate it anymore, and they are one thing led to another, and it was time. As a matter of fact, he didn't get along with the father's new wife either. It was only out of sufferance. This is what you'll find. These people will get along with you, but it's only out of sufferance, which really you shouldn't have time for anyway. So word comes that he needs to move in with us. Now by this time he's 21-year-old, and I thought things might have settled. But they haven't. There started to be some strange things happen in many different ways. And I'll let this go for now, this talk, to try and get to the end of it. So when word came to me that from the wife, the new wife, that her son needed to move in with us, I stood on the veranda because I had a couple of my children move in and had to ask them to leave because they weren't performing the way that they should. And I think that the only way you can make my approach to children was completely different. And thank God it worked. I mean, all my children are grown up in relationships and whatnot and seem to be functioning quite well. But, and they're not perfect. This isn't about children being better than the others or anything. Don't believe you me. This is about helping young adults develop as best as you can. And making sure their emotions form correctly in the right directions in all the different diversities in which they need to be successful in life. It's not easy. It's an ongoing work. So something said to me, this is going to be not good because we're going to have the big reunion of the mother and the son. What will be the outworkings of this? Because they hadn't lived together from the night that he left, when there was the upheaval of getting into bed with us for the second time. He went to live with his father. She hadn't lived with him from that point, which was about 3 or 4 years. He used to come and visit, and it was usually a misery for her by the time that he left. Although I'm sure they had some good times together. There was always some kind of sulking or something going on. And I used to think this guy's going to turn up with a girlfriend for sure. No, never ever did. Never did. And you'll find this as well because they're too attached to their mother to be able to really make a proper impact with a female, because they'll judge their partner on the same level that the mother had judged the father. You got to remember the bonds with the mother, so the mother's standards will be how they'll execute themselves in a relationship if they do meet a partner. And you'll find that the partner's on the end of some terrible judgments and terrible abuses, these young girls, and this is where their trouble starts. And this is why you've got to be careful that you understand the dynamics that are going on in the lives of the people that you meet. Now, I'm not being critical of that, but you need to understand so that you don't get damaged, because you will. So we sit down and we have a talk with this person and we lay down the rules, and one thing that they knew was, I don't muck around. I'm fair, but I don't muck around. If you start to bugger up, you will be confronted and you will fix it, or you will leave. You'll be asked to leave. Well, all the rules were set up to be able to function as part of a person in a house with other people, and away we go. Well, this is what you've got to realise. People will say things that they think you want to hear to get what they need to have, but that doesn't mean they're necessarily going to carry them out. Well, before I knew it, my wife now had more or less 2 husbands. Now, some very strange horrible things happened at this point. The first thing was the wife took a turn and she had to have an ovary out. She was due for a hysterectomy, but one of her ovaries went before she was booked in to have this, and this was around the time that all the COVID-19 stuff started, and that's another story in itself. So she's trying to juggle. I always got involved in the kitchen and with the jobs, and I did everything I could to play an active part in my role as a husband without being unfair to anybody else. But what I noticed was the laziness of this young adult man was incredible. I don't want to go into the details because I don't want to embarrass anybody that might be listening to this, because that's not my intention. I'm trying to educate people to be careful of covert emotional incest and what it can do to relationships. Well, to cut a long story short, this poor woman, beautiful woman, she couldn't spread herself that far once she had this operation. She needed help. Well, I have to say, neither her son or her daughter even made her a cup of tea. And I'm not going to start on the daughter, because that was another dysfunctional theatre that you could write a book on and make a lot of money out of. I've never seen anything like it in my life. The mother began to break down. Now, what happened was, when she went in to get the ovary out, she was already booked for a hysterectomy, but they didn't do the hysterectomy. God forbid why. All they did was take the ovary out and they sewed it back up. Poor thing. Horrible it was. So now she's got to try and run after this son that won't even fucking pick up after himself. She knows that I'm starting to look at this and go, man, this guy isn't playing his part. She knew that I was the sort of person to say, well, you have to go, but I was giving it a leeway. She's trying to get better. I'd come out of a kiteboarding accident, but I was functioning as well as I could. There was so much going on that really wasn't fair on either of us, to be honest. And this boy really wasn't contributing at all. It was only because that's how he was raised. So you've got to be a little bit flexible in your judgments. But they can only go so far as well, because once you get lazy people or people that are attached to their mothers, they begin to bring everyone down, because you're trying to not just manage yourself, but you've got to pick up after them as well. And it becomes a burden that you don't need, that you just don't need. So the pressure was on. And we had a couple of talks with this guy to try and get him to function a little bit better that he was. But I was trying to understand if there was some sinisterness behind the laziness of this boy, because he was pulling at his mother, and she really wasn't well at all. Well, to cut a long story short, about 4 or 5 or 6 weeks after the ovary got taken out, she had to go. The hospital rang up and said, "We're ready to do your hysterectomy." Now, this was a terrible shock, because my wife had had a stroke when she was young, and anesthetics and stroke people don't mix very well, because they've got minds that have been their brain has been traumatized, and anybody knows that anesthetics are a dangerous place to go. So in she goes for the second operation, and she comes back, and it wasn't good mentally for her. So I'm trying to support her, and she's trying to support her son. She's trying to get better herself. And now the daughter's started a whole new problem. And this woman, this poor woman, things started to close in on her. Now, I have to say, she made a fantastic effort to try and keep everybody happy. But the one thing that she couldn't do was get that son to move in a way in which he was an asset rather than a liability. So what started to happen, because they knew that I will go so far and no further, the son worked on the mother, and the daughter worked on the mother so hard, because they were used to having her as a slave, and my way wasn't going to work, which was you can grow up or you can get out. They worked her so hard that she began to turn against me. She began to goad me. And there's a lot more to this, but I don't think it'll be fair to go into it. So to cut a long story short, I'm finding myself back where I started, in a contention between the son and the mother. I would begin to come home and the mother and the son would be having conversations that were just not appropriate relative to information regarding our private lives and things like this. This is what you'll find. The mother will bond back with the son. Once that starts to happen, you're gone. Doesn't matter what you've done, how much effort you've put in, how well you've loved, how much, it does not matter how well you're going, what your performance is. Once this covert emotional incest gets its foothold back in, and if it starts to win influence over the person that the partner that you're with, you're as good as gone. Doesn't matter what you do, what you've done, how much effort you put in, because blood's thicker than water, and if it can get a foothold, you've got no chance. Well, I watched this. I watched it consciously. I was fully aware, without judgment. I watched these two children pull this woman to the point where she started to turn on me. And it was so sad. You could see it trying to find a way through this haze. Well, I had got to the point where I had to confront the issue. And it got so bad, I had to ask the mother and the son to leave the house. Now, you try and comprehend for a minute how hard that was for me. Because I look like the villain, don't I? But I wasn't the one causing the trouble. I was just trying to have a peaceful house. But that's not going to happen with this kind of dysfunction going on. With authority, now it's gained ground, with authority that's more powerful than the authority that's in the marriage. So the long story short, the marriage dissolved, and it was irreparable. So what's the point of what I'm saying? This is the point of what I'm saying. While you're meeting someone's needs, the person will be prepared to sacrifice an element of their relationship with their child. But what you'll find is, if you're on your game and you know how to meet a person's needs and all that sort of stuff, once you fill them up, once their needs are met, you will find that they'll gravitate back to the behaviour that they were used to before you come along. One way or another, this will happen. You will see this. And these are people that, because of the dysfunction that was there in the first place, it's a warning to you, to say to you, there's nothing stopping this from reoccurring or happening again. And what happens is, you begin to be portrayed to be no different to the husband that had failed before you, or the partner that had failed before you. Even though you're not. You're watching these people disintegrate. And there is really nothing you can do about it. You got to hope that the person that you're in love with can see that you've been entangled into something that just isn't unhealthy. It's even, I'd call it unholy. and destructive. So the mother went to live with the son. She actually ran off with the son. That's basically the bottom line of it. So what does that mean? It means that everything went round in a circle. The marriage was undermined by the covert emotional incest between the mother and the son. And that's all there is to it. That's how deep this power can go. It doesn't go away. You have to understand it's an unbreakable form of dysfunction. And some of you may have been able to beat it, but many of you would be damaged from this horrible form of relationship. And I would advise anybody to be very, very careful if you see this, if you're starting a relationship and you see this. I would advise you to back out. Just back out. You don't have to be cruel and nasty. Just back out, because you will be harmed and damaged, because that's how this bond works. It's a very powerful, fierce, dominating bond. And it's not something you want to get mixed up with. How do you deal with this? First, you've got to recognize it. You've got to look at the way in which these people look at each other in the eyes. The parent will almost look into this person's eyes in a worshipping way, in a way in which the submission is so deep, it's mortifying. It's horrifying. I'd even go as far as saying it's startling. And that's going to be the first warning sign. Look at the interaction going on between the mother and the son, relative to the damage that's been done by the father or the partner that they spent most of their lives with, because you will be judged the same way. Inevitably, that's the only standards that they know. So it doesn't matter if you've done right or wrong, good or bad, you will be judged by the crown of the standards that they've judged, of the judgment that's gone before you. Okay, that's just how it works. Now, this might all be offensive to some people, but I really don't care, because this is how it works. And if I can protect people from this, then at least I've made a contribution from my experience. So the first thing is to recognize it. The second thing is to ask yourself, admit to yourself that you're going to become a victim you're going to fall prey to this. Not many mothers can really withstand ultimately the loss of the love of their child over somebody else. I'm yet to see it. I've seen them try. I've seen them try, in some cases, very hard. I've seen some just fall by the wayside really quick. But you have to be mentally aware that all these possibilities are there as soon as you see this, so that you're spiritually and emotionally not surprised by the damage that can be done. Okay? Because you're going to be villainized, you're going to be demonized, they're going to, whatever they can find, they'll put on you. It doesn't matter. You can, it just does not matter. This is how evil it is. It's like something out of The Exorcist. These people change. It's just the way they've allowed things to formate. And they get very critical and offended if you challenge anything that might have a positive outcome for them. There is no positive outcome for anyone in this except to let it go. You have to let these people go. That's all you can do. So you recognize it. You have to admit, when I say admit that this is probably going to go against you. And number 3 is you have to make a decision, and you have to stand on that decision. If you decide that you're going to go on with it and try and make things work, then don't be disappointed if it doesn't, and rejoice if you do. But I guarantee 9 times out of 10 you won't. You won't win. Because it all comes back at the end, and believe me, you'll see circumstances that'll work against you that you couldn't make up if you sat down and planned it for years and years. I mean, the way in which these things can work against you are absolutely incredible. They're looking for every little inch that they can find to incriminate you, to destroy the relationship. Simple. It's not the end of the world. Once you know how this works, it's really quite simple. So you have to make a decision. Do I take this on and suffer the consequences and reap the rewards? Or do I back out and go, I'm not going to put my time into this? I advise the latter. It's not about judging people. It's not about saying that they're wrong. It's about the way in which life forms people. And you have to be aware of. That doesn't mean these people aren't loving and they don't want to care. But it just means you're going to be put into an environment that can be very fierce and hostile, and it doesn't matter how good a person you are either. You will be judged, and it will be harsh. This is Dr. Jason W. Morrison, theologist, New South Wales, Australia. Bye for now.